A very warm welcome to all who are attending today. We have with us a very interesting speaker. Today I'm in conversation with Ms. Rajani Iyer.
Thank you for having me on this show.
It's our pleasure. So shall we shoot the first questions?
Already.
Who inspired you, or what inspired you to take up the legal profession? Was it by design or was it simply by default?
I'm a reluctant lawyer. My family has got a couple of lawyers. My father was a lawyer. My brother was a lawyer. In fact, from the year I left school, there have at least been 2 lawyers in the family. That's from 1968. By then, my brother had also qualified as a lawyer along with my father. But I rebelled. I didn't want to join the 2 of them doing law. So I was a reluctant lawyer. What did I want to do? I wanted to teach. I thought that what my school teachers did for me in my school, I would like to do for others by reaching out and communicating certain thoughts, communicating perhaps a different way of thinking to others who were similarly placed as me, in that they wanted to inquire, they wanted to know, they wanted to seize the moment and do something for themselves. So a couple of teachers in school inspired me to thinking, that I want to teach. Therefore, I decided I'd do economics in college. Political science and economics were my chosen subjects. Thereafter, I did my post-graduation in economics for the purposes of being able to teach in colleges economics. And I taught economics even whilst I studied law. I studied law also because of a perchance the happening of the emergency. I said, I want to know something more about how this can be done to me, an individual in India, which has always been such a free country. What is this emergency? I was told I'd have to study law. So I said, all right, I'll study law along with teaching economics. I won't give up my teaching, but that's how I entered law. So I don't know whether it's by design or whether it's by default, and whether I became a lawyer because I was destined to be one, or because I chose to be a child of destiny. I don't know.
But you had the makings whilst in college. There were inclinations at that point of time.
Absolutely. I mean, I come from an all-girls school, the Queen Mary High School. It was run by a Protestant group of nuns of those days, but now, of course, it was a Protestant school in that sense. So it was a very controlled atmosphere. And then I came into the freedom of St. Xavier's College. And in St. Xavier's College, I met wonderful individuals, both as professors of mine, as well as colleagues who are today my colleagues even at the bar. And that is how far my, link with my friends has been. I met a professor called Professor Ajay Oza. I met 2 fantastic ladies who didn't do economics, but who were role models for me. Eunice D'Souza and Nisha De Cuna, Father De Costa. And these people inspired me in some way or the other to think differently. And one of the advocates you all must be knowing of and have heard was a friend of mine then, is today my colleague at the bar, Aspi Chinoy. He was a bundle of energy then and is still a bundle of energy, toned down, but a bundle of energy. And he inspired me no end. He said that we are all here students. How is it that the college is controlling us? Wow. The school controlled me, and here someone saying, how is the administration controlling us? Started thinking, found a lot of logic in what he said. And he helped me into thinking that what he was saying about the students having a voice of their own to do things for themselves, which should blossom, had merit in it. And that is where my questioning, and I think if I am an activist today, or I'm called an activist today, I would say that that was the origin of my activism, my rebellion. So much so that my teacher from school who inspired me to be a teacher said, Rajani, you have inspired me to become a rebel. That was wonderful.
Student and the student teaching the teacher.
And the wonderful acceptance of that fact and the communication of that to me.
Yes, yes.
By my teacher from school, it was a big thing. It was a big thing. So this is all what helped me to be able to voice and understand that I had the capacity to talk, to hold people's attention. And I took that forward when I went into the campus at Kalina. There I became one of the office bearers of the student union too. And we were facing a lot of difficulties there. We had been shifted from the Fort campus and the library. The university is known by the Rajabai clock tower, which is on the library, into a place where we didn't have access to a good library to do research. And we were MA students. We didn't have facilities for getting to the university from the railway station. And there were a lot of problems that we faced. So we were a lot of activism there too. And that sort of inspired me. All right, I'm in a position to influence.
Okay.
That is where I got my confidence that I'm able to influence. And that was important for me then. Why? Because I wanted to teach. I was only looking at it from the prism of teaching, you see. I was not looking at it at all from the prism of being an advocate. I didn't want to be an advocate. In no uncertain terms, I told my father, I'm not going to come your way.
So what, in your opinion, were your skill sets which set you in good stead? And which of those skill sets would you recommend the student should possess or develop during their college days for being a good lawyer?
To attend lectures, but to think about what was talked about in lectures after the lectures. You've got to be able to analyze and think out of the box after the lectures, because the lectures want to finish a curriculum. One of the ways in which you can do it, ways in which I did it, was to take tutorials for other students at the end of the day. So we had batches of 5 or 6 persons who used to come, and we used to have tutorials in the evening after I finished my teaching in economics. I used to come back to Government Law College, and I used to be able to talk to them about concepts in Constitution. What is a republic state? I mean, you will not believe it, but some of our MLAs today who were our students then said, Rajani Didi, ye republicanism kya hota hai? Ye republic kya hota hai? Ye unitary government kya hota hai? From there. So communicating and talking to them and getting things clear even in their heads, an element of teaching, but still you had to explain things to them. That clarity of thought has to be in your mind. You've got to just drop all the other things that you are thinking of and be able to focus. Ability to communicate, ability to understand what it is that is being attempted to be communicated to you in a classroom, and say, all right, this is what you're saying, but these are the questions which I have, and put it to that gentleman who is standing on that stage and talking to you. And have the confidence you have to develop the confidence to be able to speak your mind. No better place than in college, because you're not accountable for so many things. You won't be held responsible. You may be held accountable for some of the wrong things that you do, but you won't be having such an impact that you'll be responsible for others. You'll only be responsible for yourself. So have the ability and the humbleness to make mistakes and accept your mistakes. All this is something that has to be developed, because this is going to stand you in good stead when you're going to stand in front of a judge and perhaps make a mistake or two. You'll know how to handle those mistakes. You'll know what words to use. You'll know what language is not to be used then. All this, the expression. Therefore, yes, the language of the court is the language of which you must have command. This is something which is very important as far as the skills that you develop. And one of the ways in which you develop these skills is to take part in debates and in moot courts in law colleges. I took part in moot courts in each of the 3 years, and I think I did pretty well. Now, I remember a question, for example. What is the ratio of the judgment you're citing? Now, my opponent did not know the meaning of the word ratio. Right now, that is not done.
Oops.
These are terms that you must be in a position to appreciate even as a student of law. This is the training that moot courts give you. So take part in that. All this is, what will happen is that a lot number of us be diffident. I can't blame them. A lot number of us may lose in the first or the second round, but if I keep persisting, I might come to the third and the fourth round. That is what is important. The first time I may not be able to communicate what I want to say. The second and the third time I'll be able to communicate what I want to say. I'll be able to say it in a better fashion. Don't be at all afraid if you don't know the correct English word. We are in India. Very often, I have used the term which is a Hindi or a Gujarati or a Marathi word to express exactly what I want to convey to the court. I have not stepped back and be confident when you're doing it. This is something that will come only with practice. You've got to be confident. This confidence will have to come because at best you're wrong. Aur kya hoga? Kuch nahi hoga.
So also a sense of good reading habits, which has I've observed a lot of the good counsels have had good reading habits over their years, and that has stood them in good stead.
Yeah, reading habits, the source of reading habits are twofold. The source of reading habits are either your school or your family. Now, I have to acknowledge that a large number of us may not have the benefit of both or either. Therefore, where do I get the inspiration to read? I may not have that happy circumstance where I am inspired to read. Of course, if you have access to any form of literature, I know Ashok Bhai used to very often quote Sanskrit slokas. He came from a Gujarati medium school, but he had that ability and that desire to read, perhaps because of both his school as well as his home. But just because it was a Indian language, that didn't prevent him from reading on his own. So the desire to read may not be there, but you have to insist that you do read. Literature of any kind, doesn't matter. You have to be exposed to it. That is what is important. Why do you have to be exposed to reading? So that you have different thoughts, you have different words. I was looking up something for an opinion the other day, and I had a thought in my head, but I was not able to get the right word and the right phrase to use in that opinion. I went back to one of the texts, and there I found this, that the courts will have to lean in favor of enforcing the prohibition rather than the contract. Wonderfully encapsulating exactly what was in my mind. But that only came because I read the commentary rather than saying, "Are mujhe malum hai, so I won't read." Reading, it's a given. Control of your voice, modulate your voice, be able to throw your voice across. Nowadays, you don't really need to throw your voice across because we have mics, but we don't have mics except in the High Court, or we don't have mics across the board. So you have to be able to communicate to the gentleman sitting on, or the lady sitting on that podium, over the riffraff noise of paper, people coming in and going out. You have to be able to throw your voice at them, modulate your voice and throw it at them. These are some of the skills that you will have to develop. And whilst you are throwing your voice at them, still be able to get your point across. You're not screaming of them. Do not hesitate. The court may not accept what you say. It may ridicule what you say. It may reject what you say. So what? It's giving you a chance to learn. If they insult you, that's a different matter. you have to take it up immediately. Way you take it up immediately is because you have the confidence of the research you have done, the confidence of having read what you have, and the confidence of knowing that you are not talking out of the top of your head, but it is based on good, solid work that you have done. Therefore, speak your mind. And the bar is a lovely place. I know that I've been able to go up to a person like Fali and say, Fali, I want some help on this point. This was, of course, I'm talking about 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when he used to come to the Bombay High Court. Similarly, one has walked up as a junior to a person like Rohit Bhai or a person like Iqbal Chagla. When Ashok Bhai was not there, you went up to these people and you took their help. You didn't think twice about taking their help. The bar is a lovely place. I had once a situation where I was addressing the court and the judge was trying to help me, but I didn't realize that the judge was trying to help me. Gordon Bhai was sitting next to me, tugged my gown and he says, "Tane madad karwa magech." Now Gordon Bhai was, so much senior, but he
Yes,
then was helping me, understand the court was trying to help me. That sort of thing.
that's wonderful. That's really wonderful.
Absolutely. So these are the three important things that you must understand.
What were your personal traits which have honed and shaped you as a professional? Because primarily the legal profession is a male dominated one. But personally, as a woman, what were your traits which have shaped and honed you and made you succeed as one of the very few senior lady counsels?
Wow. A refusal to accept that I'm a, that's a first. I did not in any way think of myself as being different in any which way. Two, I have to accept that I was very fortunate in that I had a family which supported my decision of being an advocate. My father passed away about 4 months after I decided to enter the bar, a year and 4 months after I passed my law. Because after
Okay.
my law, I did my solicitors. So for 1 year, I was in a law firm doing my articles. And then I decided after my solicitor's exam that I'm going to walk across because I couldn't sit at a table. I decided I'm going to, practice and address the court. And my father passed away within 4 months thereafter. So in that situation, my family supported me. They did not raise their eyebrows and say, what the heck are you doing coming home so late? Why are you working so hard? Why are you staying out of the house so late, etc.? No questions asked. Now, perhaps that was partially because I joined the Chambers of Ashok Bhai, a family friend. Because Ashok Bhai's father was my father's senior. So I had known Ashok Bhai since I was about 3 years old, that sort of thing. So perhaps that is one of the reasons. But what made me stay on in this profession, Sunita, you have to understand, it is a demanding profession. And I am lucky in that I stay within 2 miles of the High Court premises. I'm just down the road near Roxy Theatre, compared to Fountain, where the High Court is situated. So I don't have to travel those humongous distances that a lot number of our lawyers, friends, younger lawyers have to travel today.
True.
I have to spend that physical energy. I did not have to spend that physical energy in traveling. Added to the fact that in those days, we had this wonderful institution called the High Court Library, which is where all lawyers sat and communicated, and there was a lot of camaraderie. You not only, exchanged ideas and discussed matters, because you had to be in court physically, there being no cell phone, you had to physically go and check what matter was reaching in court. You didn't have this board in the library or the bar association which told you which number. You had to go and physically check that all the time. You had court clerks who came and told you about all this. So the entire environment then was different. So because of that, what happened was that one of the persons in the library was not in a position to take up a matter. they would look around, Biju kaun hai? Who else is there in the library to whom you can suggest that the brief be given? And that is where I got a lot of pass-on briefs from persons like Navneet Bhai Shah, Hiralal Bhai Thakkar, who are seniors today or no more with us today, but they used to give me a lot of work. Now, it was pass-on work, but it gave me a chance to be exposed to more clients, more solicitors, more advocates on record, more judges, more interactions, and more communication skills, which were then visible in an open court of law. This was the second reason why I feel that initial support, which I got as a junior, made me stay on. And I can't ever forget the role of Ashok Bhai and what he did as a senior. Ashok Bhai by then was one of the top lawyers in the bar. I therefore even had doubts whether I should join Ashok Bhai, who was so senior, or someone who was slightly more junior, who would not, who would get work which they can pass on to me. Even then it was my thought, because my 1 year at Mullahs had taught me how the system works in some sense. So I said, shouldn't I join someone more junior than Ashok Bhai? But anyway, the decision was made, and I requested, all of us requested. And Ashok Bhai said, of course, Avi ja kale, that sort of thing, because he had known me individually. The sort of work that he did, charity work that he did, the pro bono work that he did, which just encompass a range of matters, whether it be for the blind, whether it be a doctor student from Pune, whether it be the Spastic Society, or whether it be a person like Babu Rao Samant and Mrunalini Gore, Mrunaltai Gore, as we used to call her, who had this problem with the manner in which the then government was allotting cement, and the Indira Gandhi Pratibha Pratishthan trust matters. He would address such a wide range of non-commercial matters into which we would be given an insight, into which we would be asked to play a role by him. This sort of encouragement also gave me, as a junior of A, B, C, in the various matters, I'm not saying Ashok Bhai, any of the seniors who was handling that matter, an exposure in court. That exposure in court itself led to a certain amount of confidence. So it was this sort of exposure to various sorts of matters which also led to the situation where, despite being a person who was rebelling against coming to law, I started enjoying law. I enjoyed what I did, and I was doing what I was enjoying. Initially, when I came from economics to law, I wasn't enjoying what I was doing.
Yes, sure.
I started enjoying what I was doing, and that became very important. That made me persist in this profession. And I didn't have the pressures, the economic pressures that a large number of us face today, Sunita. I have to be thankful for that.
So, going by what you're saying, a lot of first generation lawyers still believe that they cannot break the glass ceiling. To that extent, whatever you have stated, would those be your personal aptitudes which have made you succeed despite what they term as glass ceiling? And to what extent would you say that these personal aptitudes, ambition, hard work, mentoring opportunities, which do you think would be your top 3 traits which have enabled you to so-called break the glass ceiling?
Hard work and aptitude, they are two sides of the same coin. The support which I got, whether it be from my family or it be from various persons in the profession, and my ambition to address the court and do it well.
Okay.
For that ambition, whatever I needed to do, I did at a personal level. Ambition in the right sense of the word. I didn't want to
Yes.
get an order at all cost. I wanted to be able to address the court at all cost. Therefore, I remember something that Rohit Bhai told me once. Rohit Bhai Kapadia told me once. He said, Rajni, even if you get a brief for directions, which is all that you'll get for the first year, a year and a half, read that brief. Know the dates. You might just get a kind judge who may want to know the details of that, and you might be able to speak to that judge. There was one judge who was very abrupt with me. I therefore started refusing work in his court. Rohit Bhai said, Rajni, that's the wrong approach. Now, Rohit Bhai was not at all in any way my senior. He was a member in this wonderful room called the library. He just reached out. He says, the way to tackle this judge is to accept work and be ready to go on with it. The moment the judge knows you're ready to go on with it, he may just back down. Instilling this sort of confidence in a junior is something which is innate in the Bombay Bar. And I got the benefit of that. Therefore, the support I got from persons like him. And also, the support I got from the training which I got from my master in Mullah and Mullah, Mr. Nariman Mistry, and my immediate, if I may say, teacher cum boss, Mr. Iban Faizullah Boy. In that 2 years which I spent at Mullah's, training to be a solicitor. And the hard work which was required to pass the solicitor's exam, which my father insisted I should, and I said, "Theek hai, main kar lungi, aapne kaha hai, to kar lungi," and I did the solicitors. So I realized the hard work and study which is required to pass that exam. Now, all this was because of my ambition that I am not able to do what I wanted to do initially, that is teaching. I've got a second lease. The second lease is in the law. It is a wonderful tool of change. It has brought about so much of relief to so many of these pro bono cases, clients that Ashok Bhai was working on, that I'm going to stick around. I'm going to try and make this something that will count for change, that I am going to be party to. So these are the sort of thoughts which made me just stick around and take the benefit of, as I said, my father was not in the profession, but he was in the profession for a good 40 years in the criminal courts. And I'm not at all doing criminal work. But the good, the positiveness of his work for 40 years, his body of work for 40 years, the bonhomie that he left, not the bonhomie, what should I'm missing the happiness that the reputation that he had built up. I was the sole beneficiary of that, Yeah, Krishnamurti ni chokri she, so if we can, let us help her, sort of thing. They wouldn't have helped me had I not delivered the goods.
Yes.
So it was, I had to live up to the trust that they were putting in me. Because I lived up, they trusted me more. Because they trusted me more, I had to work harder. Because I worked harder, I was able to earn their trust. So it was that sort of a spiral sort of a relationship. So therefore, one was able to be seen in court. I'll give you an example, Sunita, right, of breaking the glass barrier, since you used that term. It was a matter in which I was briefed with Ashok Bhai. Ashok Bhai was busy in some other court. The matter reached in courtroom number 40. And Justice Bharucha was presiding over courtroom number 40. So I had seen in a couple of matters before mine that he was not willing to keep it back for the senior. So I was very happy. So I said, "Mane chance maan se." So I got up and I said, "I appear with so-and-so." And he said, "Yes." So I said, "I appear for so, and these are the facts of the case." And I started the matter. At which stage, before I could really get into the arguments, Ashok Bhai came into the room. And just one gesture of Justice Bharucha to Ashok Bhai. I don't know whether you're able, he just said, "Sit down." Just that one gesture inspired us. Now we had judges of that type. We had judges like Justice Bharucha, we had judges like Justice Linton, we had judges like Justice Rege, we had judges like Dharmadhikari Sahib, the senior Dharmadhikari Sahib, who encouraged us juniors at the bar at that stage. I mean, Justice Bharucha was a person who it was difficult to communicate to sometimes, is the reputation that he had. But this gesture showed me otherwise, you know?
Yes, a different experience.
Yeah, you take all this as something that inspires you. And that is why if today at the bar, we members of the bar see that the junior members are not getting it from the bench, it is our responsibility as members who've been around for some time to give them that confidence, to instill that confidence in them, to be able to break the glass barrier on their own. I remember I did not realize that I had said it, but one of the lady members of the bar once came up to me and said, "This is the difficulty I'm facing." So apparently I told her, "You just act 6 inches taller than you are." She came back and told me, "Rajani, you don't know how much that sentence inspired me."
Wow.
You know, these sort of things is something which is encouraging. This is what we owe to the bar, for the bar to be vibrant, to be alive, and to be able to speak its mind, to be able to help all these guys and girls. When I say guys, I mean girls, break that glass ceiling, break that wall of non-acceptance that they may feel they are facing.
Rajani ma'am, how did the chambers of the late Ashok Desai shape you and the kind of matters you dealt with and changed or shaped your legal career? And the curiosity would be to also what should a young lawyer look for in a chamber?
Okay.
Join.
I get what you mean. Yeah. You know, Sunita, when I joined the bar, I was already had my short interview with Ashok Bhai. In that short interview, I was made to realize two things. One, that physically Ashok Bhai's chambers were not very big at that point in time. We are talking about sometime in 1978. We had chambers in a small little room, which was in the Central Bank of India outside, just adjacent to Little and Company, where Anil Bhai also had his chambers. So this was part of Anil Bhai's chambers that Ashok Bhai was also sitting in. So one of the first things that Ashok Bhai said is, of course you're welcome to join chambers, but physically you may not be able to sit in chambers. So when we talk about chambers, Sunita, what we have to realize and remember is that chambers is your lineage in court. All right? It's your lineage in the profession. Which chamber do you belong to? What is the reputation of that chamber? What is the sort of work that that chamber does? Chambers is not a physical identity. It is not a physical room. It is not a physical space. So when we talk of chambers, what is the importance of chambers? Do I belong to the family of lawyers who are juniors to a person who has X, Y, and Z standing at the bar and A, B, and C reputation at the bar? Are the two going hand in hand, or are the two not going hand in hand? Am I brilliant, but yet am I a person who the judges will always double guess? They will read every line of a judgment along with you to see that you are not omitting a word or adding a word whilst reading out that judgment. You know, this is what chambers is all about. It is the reputation of that chamber, which is your identity.
Sure.
Ashok Bhai's chambers taught me a couple of things. First, the light note. He said, "Rajani, you've joined my chambers, but remember 5 things in this. There are 5 principles that you must always remember and never forget." What are those 5 principles? And here is that mischievousness in Ashok Bhai, you know, which is part which was part of his persona, which I miss so much even today. He says, if you're a junior, you remember that your senior will never be there when you require him or her. If you're a senior, you'll never find your junior there to do whatever work you want. So forget that. That's the second principle. The third principle is that if you want your solicitor or advocate on record to do something, it will not be done. You have to go on the basis that it will not be done. Again, the mischievousness. Huh? Third, the judge knows nothing. He doesn't read. He's not instructed like you are by your clients. The judge knows nothing of the matter. He knows the law, but he knows nothing of the matter. So you have to be preparing him to know everything about the matter and the benefit of what instructions you have got. Keep that in mind. And last, the clients will always pay. Whether you lose or whether they lose or they win, they will pay. So don't have that at the back of your mind. And that was always said with that twinkle in his eye. Now, countenance this with the 5 principles I was informed would be my guiding principles. And something that I would always face when I decided to walk across from the family of solicitors to the family of counsel at the bar. I was told that you're not a good Jew. You're not a Parsi. Where will you get your work from? Who will be your clients? You don't have a godfather in the profession. You're joining the High Court. So that any appeal from the High Court will be direct to the Supreme Court. So much money will be required for that. It's not as if you're joining the Small Causes Court Bar or the City Civil Court Bar, so that there is an appeal or a writ jurisdiction to the High Court within Bombay itself, which is cheaper. And don't forget, you're a lady.
Oh.
So contradistinguish these 5 principles as communicated by a senior solicitor. And these 5 principles that Ashok Bhai spoke to me about. And that gives you an indication of the encouragement which exemplified, the approach that he was encouraging me to have when I entered the family of lawyers. Amazing. It is a serious business, but you have to love what you're doing and be happy in what you're doing, is the message that he sent out. And the way in which you can do it, he exemplified by what he did. He would always, always, always insist on that you have to ensure that you are correct with the court. You don't in any way mislead the court. You don't in any way make the court double guess what you're saying. You have to be professionally correct, but you have to be innately correct. You can't tell an incorrect fact. If you say that gray is not gray but white, your reputation should be such that they will accept that it is such a faint gray that it can be white. This is what he inculcated in us. And that we are here, of course, to earn money because it's our profession. But here we are also here in order to do a service to persons who have issues with others, with the government, with themselves, with their family members. You have to render service. This also underlines so much of the pro bono work that he did. This is what I think is what Chambers is all about. The culture is of honesty, the culture of being able to do and say the right things. When I say the right things, it's not politically right thing, but the correct things, innately correct things, innately right things. And that is something that is what is Chambers for me.
After a couple of years, Ashok Bhai moved to Delhi.
Yeah.
So after that, who was your support, your mentor, your go-to person, whenever you had any query or you wanted to discuss something? Or were you fairly independent and you didn't need anyone?
I was fairly independent, yes, by that time. But no, as I have been telling you earlier in this chat as well, the bar was a very friendly bar. So you could walk up to anybody. The change really came about when, with the introduction of cell phones in a large way, people started staying in their chambers and not coming into the bar. That is when the change really happened. And therefore, I had the benefit at that point in time of going to a couple of persons who did not have their chambers in the fountain area, or who did not have chambers at all because of their thought processes that was elitist, or be whatever that may be. But the
Sure.
persons I would go to were basically three persons. One is a gentleman called Lalit Chari. He's now no more with us, but the legendary A.S.R. Chari's son, Lalit Chari. Fortunately for me, Lalit was a person who again was a family friend, because my father had worked with A.S.R. Chari.
Yes.
And A.S.R. Chari was a very good friend of my grand uncle. So in that sense, I had known Lalit off and on. So when I joined the bar, Lalit was my go-to person for a good laugh, for any help that I required. So he was the person I would go to for law. Another person I would go to is a person who is who was also a person who sat at the same table as I sat at in the High Court, and that is Justice Sri Krishna. He used
Okay.
to be at the end of the table where I used to be sitting. That was the
Okay.
second person I. The third person that we always had the assistance of, guiding hand, so to say, holding of our hand, so to say, was Gordon Bhai Thakkar, who again sat just opposite where I sat, across the table in the library where I always sat, and that was in room number 38. These were the three seniors. But apart from these, who were the persons who helped us in that sense? Ah, Uma Ben Shah.
Yes.
She is has over 50 years experience at the bar. She
Yes.
used to be my name. She used to sit next to me on the library table, and such a what should I say, bhandar of knowledge of case law. Uma Ben, I want this point. I'd get it. That sort of thing. Made me lazy, but I depended upon Uma Ben. Her husband, Kishore Bhai, he was the
Yes.
one who gave me my first brief, my first appearance, my first fee. I'll never forget this couple, Uma Ben and Kishore Bhai Shah. Other persons who helped me, not necessarily after Ashok Bhai left, but continued their relationship with me even after Ashok Bhai left. That's the way I would like to put it. Are
Sure.
3 or 4 persons. One is a person called Jasubhai Shah of Messrs. Shah and Sanghvi, who had briefed me even as a junior and continued to brief me even after Ashok Bhai moved into Delhi. Another gentleman was the late Mr. Fadke of Messrs. B.A. Fadke and Company. He continued to brief me before Ashok Bhai, even after Ashok Bhai moved on to Delhi. That's the second person I would say who helped me in, in staying afloat and
Yes.
climbing up after Ashok Bhai was no longer there, in order to ensure that work came my way. And as you rightly pointed out, I had gotten to a point thanks to the inputs from the various persons who had known of my work, thanks to the exposure I got working with Ashok Bhai, and my interaction with judges. I had become fairly independent, and I was getting work on my own. So to that extent, work-wise, it was not a problem. I had also by then got, because of the pro bono work which I had done with Ashok Bhai, used to get a lot of inquiries and a lot of work, not professionally rewarding work monetarily, but work which I could apply my mind, which was pro bono work at individual level. It might be a person who was in problems with the authorities and therefore required help. It could be a person who was in problems with the family and therefore required help. So I used to do some amount of legal aid work also at that time. I remember my first legal aid work in that sense was because of Justice Dharmadhikari. This was not because Ashok Bhai was not here. It was when Ashok Bhai was here, but that continued. That gave me, that I was a place which legal aid felt they could approach me if needed, where it was a lady who was being harassed by her husband, and he had called me to his chambers, which was courtroom, which was room number 41, next to 40, and he says, Rajani, I'd like you to take this. Now, why Justice Dharmadhikari asked me of all persons at that time, and I don't know. I feel it is because he had seen me with Ashok Bhai in various matters and felt that I could be trusted with it. This is that trust element which is required for you to grow at the bar.
Yes.
And which will help you break that glass ceiling as well.
Yes, true, true.
Yeah.
So over the years, you've dealt with a plethora of matters of various kinds, pro bono, paid clients, etc. Government matters, matters relating to the public good. Which are the ones which have left a lasting impression on you, or which have shaped your future thinking in relation to certain matters?
I think by now it is history that the first couple of years at the bar were taken up with the pavement dwellers and the slum dwellers case, which was, just post-emergency and something where they were being shunted out. It's now known as the Olga Tellis case. That was the first which took a lot out of me emotionally. Moving on from there, we then had Ashok Bhai handling the cement matter, where there was this additional surcharge, if I might call it, of 40 rupees for every bag of cement that the government allotted to various builders. That was the second matter, where it was pro bono work. Related to that were the various Indira Gandhi Pratibha Pratishthan, Indira Gandhi as commerce, all those, that entire lot of matters relating to the setting up of various trusts in the name of the then Prime Minister, which were inquired into and found to be questionable by the courts, and therefore orders passed in a lot of those matters. Now, the third sort of thing was where individual came to me for these sort of works pro bono, which was perhaps, I was associated with the Spastic Society of India. I did some work for them. I did some work for the National Association for the Blind. These were the sort of things that one did as and when the occasion arose. One matter which I was associated with for a long time was a family dispute amongst persons who were hoteliers. And that was a matter which required attention and which I was told by the clients that had been referred, my name had been referred to them by Fali Nariman in Delhi. Now that is something also which took up, which sort of encouraged me to do well in that matter. What I would like to share with you today are one case where in a writ court, an order was passed in respect of these various textile mill cases where the land was, getting opened up for various use other than textiles. An order came to be passed in the writ court, which was a very questionable order. That matter was carried in appeal by us. And in the appeal court, we had the then Chief Justice, Justice Bhattacharya, sitting with Justice A.P. Shah. And I don't know what made me do it, but I did tell that bench that the order impugned was for considerations other than pure law. And they understood what I was saying. And they could have issued a contempt order against me for having made that bold statement in open court.
Sure.
I don't know whether it was the presence of Justice Shah which saved my skin, or it was that the Chief Justice thought better than to issue a contempt notice against me. But I do know that on a subsequent day, I was called by 2 or 3 judges of our court and said, I'm glad you said this in open court. Now, you know, the important cases don't matter. I've dealt with a case, I've not dealt with a case, but what has the reputation you have garnered whilst dealing with these cases? What is the impression that you have left amongst the public, with your colleagues, and with the bench? That is what is important, Sunita.
Yes.
I might do a matter, I might not do a matter. I may take up a matter, I may not complete that matter for any reasons. But whilst I'm doing that matter, have I given it my best shot? That is what is important. You know, doing this or that is not important. What I do remember is that Ashok Bhai used to do a lot of MRTP work. Whilst in Bombay and even after he went to Delhi. Now, on a particular occasion, Ashok Bhai was not able to attend it. I was sitting at his house because Chambers was a no-no, sitting at his house where this conference was going on. So Ashok Bhai said, "Hu nahi jai shakun, you take Rajani." So I said, all right, I'll take up the matter because I'd been given that papers to read. So I said, all right, that was my first out-of-town brief. That was my introduction to travel out of town. See how casually it came my way. But then that was a client who briefed me a lot thereafter. So these are the sort of chances that you have to grab. These are the sort of chances that you make. That is what is important.
Yes.
But you must proceed from there.
A couple of questions to Rajani, the ex-teacher.
Yes.
What do you think is the importance of educational institutions as foundations for changing young minds, including persons who have managed those institutions? And a corollary to that would be, in the current scenario, not just due to lockdown, but there is a move to make education hybrid, which is partly online and partly offline. In your opinion, how will teachers shape students' mind if you're doing online learning?
At a very personal level, I have 2 grand-nephews. I call them my grandchildren. And there was a debate going on within our family whether the 2 of them should do homeschooling or should continue with a school. This was 2 years ago, before the pandemic. And I was speaking to various persons connected with education, Mrs. Chudasama being one of them. And she says, Rajani, the importance of children being exposed to other children in a school environment and the various social abilities and facilities and the techniques of living as a social human being which you develop in an environment of colleagues who are your age is very important, which you will never be able to give to your grandchildren in the event they are doing homeschooling. Therefore, school is a very important aspect. Now, remember, Mrs. Chudasama is today 80 years old. Therefore, she's thinking from a position where it was wholly physical school buildings and schools, right? Today, we are coming to a situation where it is impossible to have little children going into school and enjoying that sort of freedom. Because one, social distancing, mask, I had this lovely foreword where the mother says, this was not the mask which I sent you to school with. And the child says, yes, I exchange it with so-and-so, and he exchanged with ABC, and ABC exchanged it with X, Y, and Z. And that is why I don't have my mask which you gave me in the morning. Now, this is the reality also which we have to face. That today they are not going to be in a position to really have the freedom of bonding with each other physically in a physical environment. If that be so, then what happens? That is what we have to inquire. Then you have no option but having online teaching. The problem with online teaching is that you are in one stroke making unavailable learning to half our child population, if not more. You will not be able to give those few hours of freedom that, that meal that they used to get, that used to be the inducement for the families to send them to schools, that nourishment that our children required. All that is not going to be available. And therefore, when we talk about hybrid, that's a step even further, where you will have to be able to train your teachers first for a hybrid situation. What are your syllabuses which are going to be taught physically, which can be taught online, and which cannot be taught physically? Which are those which can only be taught physically and not online? What are you going to do about subjects which are not, straight and narrow? Things like elocution, things like drama, things like music, things like craft, things like stitching. I mean, all the cooking, all this. How are you going to manage all this? Because this is what gives the complete persona to a child. Of course, we are not giving it today to a large number of our children. But those of us who did have them, we're going to be denied that as well if we go in for a hybrid, which is underbaked. Yes. That is my fear. That is my fear. The same will happen even for legal education, graduate, postgraduate, etc. Because the ability to be able to question, to be able to read, to have access to judgments, to have access to law commentaries, to have access to law books, to have access to other lawyers who will talk to you across a table, who will discuss it with you across a table. For example, Lalit used to have every once a week in the weekend after this court hours, he used to have a session on imparting the principles of laws of evidence. I used to be able to go up to Navneet Bhai and say, Navneet Bhai, I want to pick your brains. Why is this so? Couple of days ago, I rang up Kishore Bhai. Even today, I rang up Kishore Bhai and say, Kishore Bhai, what is this? How is this? This sort of communication with and amongst lawyers, by lawyers or law students, is not going to be possible, because law students won't be able to have this sort of a dialogue with their professors. Their professors were available to them during the college hours. But after that, they might be practicing advocates. They may not be available to them online or otherwise after college hours. What happens to that sort of discussion? I remember Justice Patel, when he was teaching at the Government Law College, he used to take in visual material and communicate various thoughts to the children. How is this going to be possible? These are the challenges, which are going to come when we talk about hybrid, when we talk about online, because all these are systemic changes. These systemic changes cannot be knee-jerk reactions to the present pandemic. It has to be woven into our society for it to be available pan society. Is it available only to me who's got a roof in a pakka building? Is it available to the children of my staff who work at home, who live in kacha buildings? Is it available to persons who are in slums? True. This is the pan society that you have to address.
Do you think, a thought has been going through me that we have maybe far too many law colleges producing many more law graduates than are required currently in the profession. What are your thoughts on it? And well, some of our legal education in some of the smaller colleges leaves a lot to be desired. What do you think are the necessary changes in our legal education system to produce world-class professionals?
I'd address this at two levels. One, my father says lawyers will never be out of work because crime never takes a holiday. He used to practice in the criminal courts, remember that. All right. He didn't ever think about there being a pandemic, which is going to keep lawyers away from work. Sad reality is this. The second aspect that we have to think about is, when I did law was a very, very difficult examination, a very difficult examination to fail. It is not so today. Today, it is not an examination which is all that easy to pass. It is being made more and more closed, if I may say so already. All right. So compared to when I was a student and everybody said you could just walk through the law exams, even if you just studied for 2 weeks before the exams, that is not so today, is what I understand. But what is being taught today is very much the same thing as was being taught 40 years ago, with a little peripheral change here and there. It is this aspect of it which requires to be changed. I don't think our emphasis will have to be on world-class lawyers. May I request all of us to think in terms of the lawyers today need to handhold and address the issues of the Indian population, the Indian people, the Indian society, the Indian workers, the Indian family members, the Indian employees, the Indian commercial people. What are the sort of work and what is the sort of issues that they are doing which leads to disputes which they bring to courts? Are we producing lawyers who can address their difficulties? I would rather that our various colleges also addressed this issue. When I say also address this issue, why I'm saying this is that some of our top leading colleges today are concentrating on having curricula which are producing world-class lawyers. The other colleges must also adapt so that even if it sounds ridiculous, have what is the bulk of litigation? 138, all right? So concentrate on 138 case law, concentrate on discussing that section threadbare on the basis of judgments, not on the basis of the section, because it's just one section, but make people think, how can that be changed? How can that be taken forward? Another large amount of litigation is because of disputes with authorities, administrative authorities. Why can't we have active discussion at the college level amongst students, amongst professors, amongst administrators as to why it is not possible for us to have much more impactful content of the provisions of Section 80 when you give notice, when you're going to sue or act against a government, that you have them try and sort it out. How can that be done? Can we not have our education focus on issues like that? Another big area of litigation is family law, and today commercial law, where it is mandated that you'll have alternative dispute resolution other than litigation, other than courts. Now, why can't we have that becoming central? Why are we being made litigators and not conciliators? Why are we being made to concentrate on, things like litigation in courts and not mediation or arbitration or negotiation? The art of negotiating is also something that must be introduced in our law courts. For negotiating, what are the skills which are required? Perhaps psychology might be a subject. Perhaps sociology may be a subject. All
Yes.
these are subjects also which must be forming part of our legal curriculum. Because this is what I find is so essential when I am dealing in mediations, I'm dealing in arbitrations. All
Yes.
this will have to become part of our curricula, Sunita, so that I don't want our law colleges to concentrate on international lawyers. I want them to concentrate on good domestic, commercial resolvers of issues. Pardon me for saying this, but you know, it's an answer to a question that you put to me and gave me a chance to relieve myself of what was within me. Thank you.
No. So, on a lighter note,
Yes,
you travel a lot. Uh,
yes.
Typically, every year
I
you
used to travel a lot. Now, of course, I'm not getting permission from my brother saying you're not going to travel till the vaccine comes. So,
take. So, over the years, you've traveled a lot and you have a fixed schedule, and the judges are aware, the clients are aware, the law firms are aware that this is Miss Rajani Iyer's takeoff time.
yeah.
So, which are the most interesting places you've traveled? I understand you have a fabulous collection of pictures of Ranthambore tigers. Tell us of the nice, some of the most interesting places you've been to.
I've been fortunate in that very soon after I became a lawyer, I was able to start traveling. I hadn't traveled till 1980. 1980, I sort of removed my shackles and I started traveling from around 1982. And I was traveling till March 17, 2020. I stopped on March 17, 2020. I have traveled to a lot of incredible places. I was introduced to Ranthambore by a lawyer. Mr. Taraporwala used to be the government pleader in the city civil court, and then he became the legal correspondent for the Indian Express. So he once came up to me and said, Rajni, I said, Haji, I require bait. I said, I'm sorry. He says, I require bait for the tigers of Ranthambore, and I think you're juicy enough to be bait. Will you come with me to Ranthambore? And that is where my love story with and my love affair with Ranthambore started. This was sometime in the 80s. I used to visit Ranthambore twice a year if possible, if not more often. This relationship has continued even after Barjorji passed away, thanks to his daughter, Sunnu Taraporwala, with whom I was in Ranthambore last November. So yes, it is for me one of the most exciting places. I have not felt the absence of not having visited Corbett or any of the others because Ranthambore for me is magic kingdom. I will go there at any time of the day. Talking about my travels, it was facilitated because as a youngster at the bar, I was member of a couple of international organizations which were Europe-based, and therefore they used to have their conferences in August. So August, September, October was the time when I was not available here. That is the time when I used to go attend these conferences and then take a couple of weeks thereafter off as my holiday in that place wherever I visited. So once I remember the judge said, can we have this particular date? And I'm sorry, my opponent said, can we have this date to the judge? And the judge says, I think you may need to have another date because Ms. Iyer won't be here. It is the middle of our holiday time. So yes, it was well known a couple of years ago, decades ago, in fact, that is when I'm not going to be available. Thereafter came this wonderful system where you could note down the days that were convenient and you were in a position to tell your solicitors, I'm sorry, I can't accept the brief because I'm not in town. So that was another way of doing it, which was the loveliest place which I visited. The loveliest place which I visited for a person who's always been in the tropics was Alaska. And the reason why it was one of the loveliest places is one of the saddest days of my journeys. I saw an iceberg break. I saw the glaciers break and plop into the sea. And I said,
Oops.
ooh, wow. Little did I realize that was the day that I will always relate as being the start of my association with global warming. For me, those were the portents of what we 10 years later, 20 years later would say, my God, this is global warming. For me, a wonderful mental image of that collapse of the glacier is today one of the most horrendous episodes of my life. Because, yeah, that's when I saw global warming in action. So this is what, travel has taught me. The travel has taught me not to be, not to condemn, not to be too judgmental, to accept people at more than face value, to be always able to see the other side of something. So much so that whenever we had an issue, as late about 2 or 3 months ago, the leader of our group with whom I used to travel used to say that, yes, Rajani used to be the person I used to quietly go and say, Rajani, this is the problem we are facing. How do you think we should solve it? And she was able to see the other picture, other side of the picture to what you all guys who were traveling with me were demanding, and suggest things. So it is an ongoing learning process, how to deal with situations, how to deal with people, how to deal with things which are not apparently going the way it ought to. May be true of a journey is also always true of the journey of a case, of a matter.
So we have questions, and quite a few questions.
All right.
So first one is to Rajni, the teacher. Does teaching contribute successfully to a lawyer's journey? Or
Yes.
is it that very often people take up teaching law because they're not successful as lawyers?
All right. We once had a debate in law college. Those who can do, those who can't teach, those who can't teach become blank. All right. And you had to fill in the blank and argue that proposition. Now, this was supposed to be a topic of debate in 1976. This is still a topic of debate in 2000. Now, as far as those of us who become teachers are concerned, please let us understand two things. We are students of law. We have undertaken the training of law. For what purpose? We have undertaken the training of law for purposes of earning our livelihood. I am given the option of earning my livelihood by practicing as a lawyer as well as teaching law. The Sanat permits me to do both. However, if I'm going to be a full-time teacher, I cannot be a lawyer. All this is part of the rules and regulations of the Sanat. It would be rather unfair to say that those of them who are not good lawyers become teachers. Justice Patel also taught at the law college. Mr. Palkiwala taught at the law college. Mr. Rafiq Dada taught at the law college. Homa Pithawala taught at the law college. Mrs. Roshan Dalvi taught at the law college. Not because they were not good lawyers, despite being good lawyers.
A teacher influences and shapes many, many minds, and the love of teaching goes over and above all this.
Yes, absolutely. I was so fortunate enough to hear Mr. Nani Palkiwala address Mrs. Sujata Manohar in courtroom number 3 in the famous Morarji Desai when he was branded as a CIA agent. He was arguing on behalf of Morarji Bhai, asking for that particular piece to be pulled down. And what a experience it was to hear the gentleman. I mean, so simple, so clear in the way he was expressing himself. It was tour de force experience for me. Yeah. And can you say that because he taught he was not a good lawyer? You can't. Yeah. Thank you very much, every one of you. God bless. Take care. Be safe.